Hello, I'm Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College, and this is Civil Society, a periodic podcast to provoke more thinking about issues affecting nonprofit effectiveness and success. My guest today is Jason Sabo, founder of Frontera Strategy and a longtime advocate, and may I say political strategist, for nonprofits in Texas and nationally. Most notably, he's one of the most popular presenters at our Center's Certificate in Nonprofit Leadership and Management. And I've had the pleasure of working with Jason on numerous projects over the years, and I've learned a great deal from him. So Jason, you define your focus on your website as political strategy for nonprofits and philanthropy. What does that mean?
Well, first off, Barry, thank you for having me today. And thank you to the college and to you in particular for all the work that you've done all these years to support the nonprofit community, foundations, philanthropists here in Central Texas and beyond. It's a legacy that you're creating, and we thank you for it.
You will do my eulogy.
Well, hopefully it will be a long time from now before I have the opportunity to do such a thing. Well, my work with Frontera Strategy has always focused really on two things. Number one, ensuring that nonprofit organizations themselves understand the power that they have with regards to changing public policy, and also the responsibility that they have in doing so. And number two, to do more to educate the foundations, the philanthropists, the individual donors who often hold the purse strings for these nonprofit organizations about what they, as funders, foundations, the financiers of these nonprofits, what they can be doing both themselves as advocates, but also what they can be doing to encourage their grantees and their nonprofit partners to get engaged in advocacy and in changing public policy. We all know that we can't write a check big enough to solve today's problems. Nonprofits can't have a staff large enough to solve all of today's problems. So what we need to do is collectively work together as nonprofits, foundations, to make sure that the people who are elected to write our laws, to determine how our tax dollars get spent, understand the needs on the ground in communities, and no one can tell that story better than nonprofits.
In a few minutes, I'll ask you about what nonprofits can do and can't do, but for the moment, so why do you do this?
Well, I do this specifically, and when I say this, I work as a lobbyist for nonprofit organizations. I advise foundations, I advise advocates in Texas and in a host of other countries. On a personal level, it's because I have this obsession with this thing called social justice, and I believe that all of us, regardless of what role we might have in society, have an obligation to do everything we can within our power to make the world a more equitable and just place. And I think that many nonprofit organizations are beginning to realize that the programmatic work that they have been doing, the wonderful programmatic work that they've been doing to stop child abuse, to provide comprehensive services to seniors, to protect the environment, to run art museums, all the things that nonprofits do, regardless of what kind of an organization they are ultimately impacted by public policies. And I feel that I have a personal responsibility and an opportunity to help those organizations to understand not just that they have power, but how to use that power and exert it in a way that will actually move the needle toward that goal of equity and justice.
So the Texas Legislature is about, well, not soon, but is meeting in 2019. What are some of the up-and-coming issues that folks who have an interest in nonprofits should be aware of and perhaps concerned about?
Well, the Texas Legislature, as most folks know, meets every other year for 140 days unless the governor calls a special session on a topic of his or her choosing. Our legislature, unless there is such a special session, will reconvene again in January 2019. They're going to be presented with a host of different issues. They're going to likely have a different partisan makeup. This is going to be a very interesting midterm election. But the one overarching issue that all nonprofits will be impacted by at the Capitol in 2019 will be the state budget, for a variety of reasons, ranging from the fact that our tax system does not collect sufficient revenue to meet the state's needs, to the fact that Hurricane Harvey decimated significant parts of the Texas coast and we will be paying for the tab for school construction, for the rehabilitation of state facilities, for a host of other very real, very pressing needs that were created by, hopefully, a once-in-a-lifetime storm event. The legislature will be consumed by Harvey and consumed by conversations about potentially significant budget cuts in 2019. Most folks think that all of that action really happens only during that legislative session. It's now the spring of 2018. So we think, oh, I don't have to do anything now. I've got almost a full year before the legislature convenes. The reality is that at this very moment, state agencies are beginning to draft up their budget requests to the legislature. So if they're going to be cutting programs of importance to nonprofits, the agencies themselves are going to be making those decisions months before the legislature convenes. So if you're interested in changing policy in Texas, you don't have the luxury of waiting for that 140-day window. It really is an all year, every year, 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365-day-a-year effort to be successful.
So how do I, as an average citizen, get involved in that process?
It's extraordinarily difficult. In many ways, the entire system is geared for people like me. I'm a registered lobbyist. I'm the cockroach on the system. I like to tell people, if you remember the I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill, if you could zoom in like 3 or 4 feet behind the bill, there's a little lobbyist cockroach scurrying down the steps, chasing after that
Indestructible.
bill. Indestructible. It doesn't matter. If you stomp out the cockroach, 6 more will replace it. We are always there. We're the institutional memory of the building, the lobbyists. All of my clients are nonprofit organizations and foundations. I don't work for any corporate clients. I'm the only lobbyist like that at the Texas Legislature. Everyone else is mostly there. The corporate contract lobbyists are there for specific transactional interests. If I were a common citizen and I looked at our Texas Legislature, or any other state legislature for that matter, I wouldn't know where to interact. I wouldn't have any idea about how to get involved. This system is intentionally complex and obtuse to really make it difficult for people to get involved. But the reality is, here in Texas, we have a pretty transparent political system. For free, you can watch the legislature or any committee anytime. All those hearings are archived. You can go back and keep your eye on all of this. If you want to follow legislation during the legislative session, you can go to the Texas Legislative website and set up those bill alerts for free. There are multiple opportunities for ordinary people to track what's going on at the Capitol and then to get involved. All kinds of organizations are monitoring what's happening. Follow these organizations on Twitter, on Facebook. See what it is that you're passionate about, and then come to the legislature and engage your legislature. I always tell people that the assumption is that you have to have an enormous crowd of people and a huge movement to be successful to get things done at the Texas Legislature. The reality is you don't need to have thousands of people with millions of dollars to move an issue. You just have to have a very small group of very committed and passionate people who are willing to consistently engage the process in a sustainable way. And I always tell people that if you try to get everything done in your first or any effort to engage the Texas or any other legislature, odds are you're going to fail. Focus on a handful of specific things that you're passionate about and then try to move those through the system. Anybody can do it, truly.
So when you say, well, the Texas Legislature is a mystery to many people. So what is it that you as a lobbyist, a political strategist, actually do?
The Texas Legislature is a mystery to me, and I have worked at the Capitol.
That offers hope.
I worked in and outside the legislature for about 20 years. As a lobbyist for nonprofit organizations, I do a variety of things. I make sure that my clients have a say when there's a hearing going on. I make sure that they're there to testify and that their testimony is effective, and that we've engaged the members of whatever committee we're testifying before long in advance of whenever that hearing might be. I make sure that legislative staffers are constantly being informed of the issues of importance to my clients. One of the things I'm working on right now is immunizations. So I spent the day at the legislature this morning walking all up and down the halls to make sure folks knew about a basic educational event that we're going to be conducting in partnership with a couple of other organizations at the Capitol next week about the basic science of immunizations, to make sure that staffers understand the basic facts about a pretty basic scientific issue. Lobbyists are ultimately the spokespeople on behalf of their clients. Most people have this image of a lobbyist as somebody who is making a lot of money, somebody who is passing a significant amount of that money on to legislators. They always think of the Gucci loafers in Texas, the Gucci loafers, and a raincoat. In Texas, the equivalent of the Gucci loafers is a $2,000 pair of ostrich skin cowboy boots. That's our Texas Gucci loafer. That's what people generally think of a lobbyist as. And people are right. The political system that we have is driven by one thing and one thing only, and that one thing is money. Organizations like those for whom I work typically don't have large bank accounts and huge donors who are willing to grease the political wheels using the lubricant of American democracy, which is cash. What my folks have instead is two things, really. It's hope and fear. We can bring hope and aspiration and a positive vision of the future of the state to certain legislators, and they will embrace that. Democrats, Republicans, independents, doesn't matter. People will embrace this positive vision for the future of Texas, and we work with all comers. It doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal, if you're willing, for example, to work on issues related to human trafficking, which is something that I do a lot of. I don't care how you vote on other stuff. If you're willing to fight to stop that horrible scourge on our society, come one, come all, you've got a place at our table. And then there are politicians who might not respond positively to the message that we're promoting. One of the bills that I was working on this last year was related to the expansion of the state's pre-kindergarten program to children of firefighters, EMT, police officers who were killed or seriously injured in the line of duty. Pretty non-controversial, doesn't get more apple pie than that kind of legislation. Not surprisingly, there were a handful of members of the House and one member of the Senate who chose to vote against that bill. So as a lobbyist, it's part of my responsibility to ensure that the people in their communities are aware of those kinds of votes so that they can know that there may or may not be support for their issues amongst their elected officials. And then they can go talk to their elected officials from that local district level perspective about the importance of things like pre-kindergarten.
So I know you've done a lot of speaking about and teaching, if you will, about how people see this issue of lobbying and advocacy in the nonprofit sector. So we only have a bit of time, but what are some of the myths?
The number one thing
realities.
And realities. The number one thing I always advise every nonprofit organization. I believe that the primary obstacles to nonprofit organizations participating in legally allowable lobbying and advocacy related activities is their own lawyers and their own accountants. Because the reality is most nonprofit organizations feel that the law prohibits them from engaging in lobby related activities. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The IRS is very clear, nonprofits may engage in lobby related activities. Nonprofits are prohibited specifically from attempting to influence the outcome of an election. That's called electioneering, but nonprofits have that obligation and responsibility to engage policy. So all the nonprofits who are watching this, who are in your sphere of influence, need to ask their own lawyers, their own accountants, not what they can't do around lobbying and advocacy, but what they can do around lobbying and advocacy, because most nonprofit organizations are surprised. Some of them are blown away and flabbergasted by the amount of lobby-related activities that they can be doing. I always ask people, Do you think the oil and gas industry sits around wringing its hands about the legality of lobby-related activities?
Yep.
They don't. Nonprofits are the only industrial sector in the United States that is voluntarily chosen to opt out of these conversations. And I think that when you look at how our politics often treats nonprofit organizations and the people that we serve, I think that there has been our having opted out has had a very clear negative consequence. We need to be involved. We need to be in the game.
So you're familiar with the Johnson Amendment?
Yes, sir.
Could you just explain that and why you feel nonprofits would want to maintain that?
Well, there are a couple of different perspectives on this. The Johnson Amendment, named after then Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1954, said that nonprofit organizations would not, which includes churches, would not engage in election-related activities. Why in 1954 would a Southern senator propose such a thing? Because there was
Why in 1954 would a Southern senator propose such things?
Perhaps because there was a civil rights conversation being led by many nonprofit organizations that would have made some people nervous had that activity moved into the electoral sphere. Now, when the recent tax bill was moving its way through Congress, there was a lot of talk, particularly from more conservative-leaning organizations, particularly from conservative churches, about eliminating this Johnson Amendment to allow for nonprofit organizations, churches included, to engage directly in the election or the defeat of specific candidates. That gave a lot of the traditional nonprofit organizations a lot of heartburn, because the fear was that nonprofits would lose their objectivity, would lose this nonpartisan perspective that they have always had, that has allowed them to receive foundation dollars and to always be seen as kind of hugging the middle of the road. The alternative perspective of this is that if nonprofit organizations are again choosing to opt out of a fundamental part of the conversation, they're choosing not to be as fully politically powerful as it otherwise could be. So I think that the ideal circumstance lies somewhere in between. Congress chose not to get rid of the Johnson Amendment, right. So the prohibitions are still in place, and I think it's going to be a long time before we see a run at that again. However, I think that it did open up a lot of people's eyes about the fact that there is a conversation that needs to be had in the nonprofit sector about how to engage in electoral-related activity legally. Nonprofits can register people to vote. They can participate and get out the vote drives. They simply cannot tell people how to vote to the advantage of one candidate or another.
And we'll have on our website a lot of resources, which I know you've provided us in the past.
Absolutely.
In regard to this. So, in coming to a close, is there anything that we've left out that you think is really important that needs to be added here?
I do. This is Austin Community College. We live in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, as we all know, is the capital of the state of Texas. Many of us are fortunate on a daily basis to see this beautiful red granite domed building sitting there in the middle of our town as we drive to and from. I travel all over the state of Texas. I go to Amarillo. It's a 10-hour drive to get, if you're an advocate, to get from Amarillo to the Texas Capitol. The last thing that I would ask is for all Austin nonprofits to recognize and embrace the responsibility they have to represent not just their own interests as Central Texas nonprofits, but in many ways to carry the torch for all of those thousands of other nonprofit organizations who wished that they had the opportunity to live so close to the legislature, to have so much constant access to legislative staffers. So what I would implore, beg, plead of nonprofits in Austin is to embrace that power, but do it in a way that allows you to be the voice, not just for yourselves, but for all of your allies in all of those hundreds of communities across Texas who wish that they were here with such easy access to the people who control their lives and the laws that control their lives.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Barry, for all you do.
Well, thank you for your passion and your wisdom. I think you've shared some very, very valuable information. Visit our website, nonprofitaustin.org/civil society, to read more about the issues that we've discussed today and to access some resources about those issues. Also, please share your comments on today's podcast. This is Barry Silverberg with Civil Society, a Center for Nonprofit Studies podcast in collaboration with the fantastic folks at ACCTV. Thank you for joining us.